Across Greece, there are women who still keep dresses that are hundreds of years old. Not in museums, but in their own homes, folded in wooden chests, stitched with gold, waiting to be worn again. For the past decade, I've traveled across the country photographing these traditions. My work has been published in the New York Times and National Geographic, exhibited internationally, and has received 24 awards. But it isn't about recognition, it's about memory, about how identity is carried forward in fabric and thread, in the way a community chooses to dress. This project, which I call Caryatis, has taken me from Thrace to the Peloponnese, to islands and mountain villages. And here in Epirus, with the help of the Lyceum Club of Greek Women of Ioannina, I was able to photograph some of the rarest costumes in Greece. One so important that it is protected by the Archaeological Service itself and is rarely seen outside these communities. In this film, I want to share those photographs and the stories behind them. From Ioannina we drove north towards Konitsa. The road wound endlessly up, down, through valleys and ridges, and it rained the whole way. After 2 hours, we arrived at Kerasovo, also known today as Agia Paraskevi. A small village built of stone pressed against the hillside. The streets were quiet, smoke coming from maybe one chimney, nothing else moving. But inside the house, women were waiting. They brought out the local dresses, heavy wool skirts, thick aprons and handkerchiefs folded with care. These weren't replicas or stage costumes, they were the real thing, worn by their mothers and grandmothers. After scouting for the right location around the wet streets, we started indoors. The light was dim, falling through small windows. I asked the women to stand there in full costume, and suddenly the room felt different, like it had woken up. Later, we went outside. The rain eased a little and the fog rolled down from the mountain. We climbed just far enough to find a beautiful valley amongst the mountains. The women stood there in their dresses against the mist and wet earth. And for a moment, the costumes and the landscape were the same thing. Both built for endurance, both shaped by this land. That was Kerasovo for me, the first time I realized in Epirus, a dress isn't just clothing, it carries a place inside it. The next morning, we set out for Vovousa in eastern Zagori. The road climbed higher, twisting through forest and bare hills, and by the time we arrived, the rain had returned. Vovousa is cut in two by the Aous river. The water runs fast and cold right through the heart of the village. A single stone bridge connects the two sides, its arch holding steady for centuries. This village is known for its carpenters. Wood is everywhere, beams stuck by the houses, fences patched with planks, sheds smelling of pine. Because of the rain, our first photographs were made inside the traditional house. The light was dim, falling through a single side window, but it gave the images a quiet intimacy. We had hoped the rain would ease, but it only grew stronger. Still, we went outside. We moved to the bridge, to the riverbank, and finally to the old sawmill. It is no longer in use, but it still stands as a reminder of how central timber once was to life here. Inside, the smell of aged wood filled the space, dust lay thick on the floor, and light slipped in through the openings around the structure. 4 women and 1 man wore the traditional costumes of Vovousa. Dark garments embroidered with care, the headdresses folded neatly into place. Against the timber walls, the costumes looked perfectly at home, as though the sawmill had been waiting for them to return. The rain made it hard, my equipment damp, the models cold, but the weather belongs to Epirus as much as the stone and the wood. It gave the images something no controlled setting ever could. The raw truth of this land. The people of Vovousa once lived by the river and the forest. Today, even as times change, their costumes carry those memories. Just as the bridge holds the two halves of the village together, the dress holds together their connection to the past. From Vovousa, our journey turned towards Gyftokampos. The road wound out of Zagori and into open ground where forests give way to pastures. Clouds still hung low and the rain followed us. Here we met the Sarakatsani. For centuries they lived as nomads, herding flocks through these very mountains. Their huts of timber and branches once dotted the hillsides. Today a small settlement remains, preserved as a reminder of their way of life. We waited in the tavern, drinking coffee, hoping for a break. None came. At last we decided to go ahead. Assistants ran out with umbrellas, covering the models as they walked. These costumes cannot be soaked. Once damaged, they might be lost forever. We set up, umbrellas still overhead. Then, when all was ready, I would call out, "Off with the umbrellas!" They dropped away, and for a few seconds the Sarakatsani stood alone in the rain. Proud, still, unflinching. I pressed the shutter. The rain mattered less than the image of resilience it gave. When it was done, we returned to the tavern. Dinner was served, wine and chipro poured generously. The room was filled with warmth and laughter, while outside the rain kept falling. Gyftokampos reminded me that tradition doesn't survive in comfort. It endures because people hold on to it, even when the conditions are against them. The Sarakatsani had done so for centuries, and in that moment they did so again. From Gyftokampos we traveled west towards Pogoni, close to the border with Albania. The road was quieter here, the village smaller, the fields more open. In this region the costumes are unlike anywhere else in Greece. Where most Epirus garments are dark, heavy, here everything was bright. Dresses of light fabric, aprons embroidered in finer detail, and over them all a silk headscarf more than 4 meters long. It has to be tied in a very particular way so that the red tag lands precisely on the side of the forehead. The women explained how the elders had learned to do this themselves, practicing the folds until they could manage it alone. Watching them wrap it was almost ritual, layer after layer, circling the head until the scarf became a crown of fabric. The effect is striking. The headscarf doesn't fall loose or trail away. It sits firmly, sculptural, held in place with precision. Its form reminded me of the Doric style of ancient Greece, simple, geometric, without ornament. It felt like a direct line running from antiquity to the present, carried not in stone but in fabric. We photographed first inside an old house in Epirus. It was one of the oldest homes in the village. Wooden beams sagging, walls marked with time. But when the women entered in costume, the space changed. The white garments caught the dim light, softening the whole room. Later, we moved to a barn. The smell of hay hung in the air, dust rising underfoot. In that rough space, the white of the costumes stood out even more. Their silk headscarves catching the light like halos. In Pogoni, I felt something different. Elsewhere in Epirus, the costumes speak of endurance, of hardship, of weight. Here, they spoke of clarity and light. A reminder that tradition, even within the same region, adapts to the people who carry it. From Pogoni, we traveled west into Thesprotia. The road wound down from the mountains until the Ionian came into sight. Our stop was Filiates, a town north of Ioannina. Finding the right setting took time. We walked through the streets, coffee in hand, passing houses that were too new, too bare, until at last we discovered an abandoned one. Its windows cracked, plaster falling from the walls, wooden floors creaking with every step. The air was cool and smelled of damp wood. Inside, 4 women dressed in the local costume of Filiates, dark, floor-length dresses, the sleeves heavy, the fabric dense. Across the chest and bodies ran thick embroidery stitched in golden thread. In the dim rooms, the gold caught what little light there was, glowing against the black fabric. As the women stood in the doorway or gathered by the small windows, the house changed. The silence no longer felt empty, it felt charged. The costumes carried authority. The gold thread shone against the shadows, as if declaring that memory itself was present. We moved slowly from room to room, photographing as the women sat, stood, or leaned against the old plaster walls. Each space seemed to recognize them, as if the house had been waiting for their return. What struck me most about Filiates was this balance: the darkness of the garments, solemn and weighty, and the sudden brilliance of the gold. Together, they created the sense of gravitas. By the end of the day, the light was fading fast, but it didn't matter. The golden thread had already done its work. In that ruined house, history glowed once more. Throughout my journey in Epirus, I worked closely with the Lyceum Club of Greek women in Ioannina. They opened doors to villages, guided me to the right people, and most of all, they safeguarded the costumes that became the heart of this project. Among their collection, there is one garment unlike any other, the Purpuree of Ioannina. It is considered the most treasured of them all, protected not only by the Lyceum but also by the Greek Archaeological Service. Its embroidery is so intricate, its history is so important, that it cannot even be shown casually in a museum case. On this day we were allowed to bring it out. The setting was a mansion in the city, now serving as a museum. The house itself carried history: tall windows, wooden ceilings, carpets that muffled every step. I filled the room with haze to soften the light. Slowly the space transformed. The curtains glowed, the air grew dense, and the scene felt almost timeless. The women dressed carefully, the purpuree worn with reverence. Then came the mirror. One woman held it up so that the vest was seen twice, one in reality, one in reflection. For me, that doubling captured the meaning of tradition itself. It exists here alive in the present, and it exists again in memory, multiplied across generations. Around her, other women sat quietly, dressed in the local costume of Ioannina. Their stillness, their presence gave the room a painterly quality. The purpuree shone at the center of it all, its embroidery catching what little light the haze allowed through. Photographing here felt different. In the villages, the costumes belonged to stone and rain. Here in Ioannina, the purpuree belonged to heritage itself. Not just clothing, but a national treasure. A garment too precious even to be placed in a showcase. And for a brief moment, I was allowed to frame it, to honor it, to let it speak once more. From Ioannina we traveled north again into Zagori. This part of Epirus is one of the most remarkable in Greece. 46 villages built of stone, connected by arched bridges, surrounded by some of the most dramatic landscapes in Europe. Our first stop was Ioannina, a small village near Papigo. We climbed a little above the houses, where the land opened to the mountains. Clouds moved fast across the sky, breaking the light in sudden bursts. Against this backdrop, the women stood in their costumes. Heavy garments embroidered with patience, layered in dark tones. Their stillness balanced the restless weather. Photographing there, I kept thinking that the costumes belonged as much to the peaks and valleys as to the people, both shaped by the same harsh environment. From there, we drove to the stone forest of Monodendri. It is a strange place, almost otherworldly. Pillars of rock rising like stacks of books, formed by centuries of wind and water. Among those rock columns, the women in costume looked like part of the formation. The folds of their dresses resonated with the vertical lines of the cliffs. The embroidery caught light like lichen on stone. For a moment, it was difficult to tell where nature ended and human craft began. It reminded me that tradition is not separate from landscape, it grows out of it. Our final stop was the Vikos Gorge, A 5-minute walk from the stone forest, the path dropped towards the edge. When we reached the viewpoint, the land opened suddenly and dramatically. Before us lay the deepest gorge in the world compared to its width. Its walls fall almost a kilometer straight down, and from above it looks endless. There, at the edge of Vikos, the women stood once more, the gorge behind them, their costumes already against the vast emptiness. Zagori gave me 3 faces of tradition: the mountains at Ioannina, where the costume balanced the restless sky, the stone forest where human fabric and rock formations merged, and Vikos Gorge, where the depth of history was mirrored by the land itself. Each place is different, each reminding me that these garments are not just made to be worn, they are part of the architecture of Epirus. Our journey ended in Metsovo, high in the Pindus mountains. The town has long been a crossroads of shepherds, traders and travelers, and even today it carries that same energy. We gathered in a house where the women prepared to dress. The rooms filled quickly, relatives, neighbors, friends, everyone wanted to help or simply to be present. Scarves were folded and refolded, aprons adjusted, jewelry fastened with care. There was chatter and laughter, the warm chaos of a community at work. And then, when the women stood fully dressed, the atmosphere shifted. The noise softened, replaced by a quiet pride. The costumes gave weight to the moment, connecting the room to generations before. I photographed only a handful of portraits here, just enough to capture that feeling. The intimacy of the house, the closeness of the people, the dignity of the women in their dress. Metsovo gave me a final reminder. Tradition doesn't survive in isolation, it survives because a community chooses again and again to keep it alive.
Συμπεθεροί μας έρχονται κι θέλουν να την πάρουν. Δεν μπορώ μορμάνα, δεν μπορώ, αϊ χάνομαι. Στρως τους βελέντζες πράσινες, φτιάξ' τους κι έναν πικρό καφέ και κέρνα τους να πίνουν και βάλτε το χεράκι σας στην αργύρι μου τσέπη κι αδράξτε το κλειδάκι μου κι ανοίξτε το σετούκι κι αλλάξτε τη μικρότερη και δώστε τους να πάρουν.
Looking back, this journey through Epirus was more than a series of photographs. In every village from Kerasovo to Metsovo, the costume spoke not just of fabric and craft, but of identity, of women who carried the weight of their culture on their shoulders. Each dress was different. The dark heaviness of Vovousa, the fragility of the Sarakatsani, the luminous white of Pogoni, the golden embroidery of Filiates, the treasured purpuree of Ioannina, the stone-like endurance of Zagori, and finally, the warmth of Metsovo. Together they form a tapestry of memory, a reminder that tradition isn't static. It breathes, it adapts, it reflects the land and the people. And it survives because communities choose to protect it. For me, the Caryatis project is not only about recording these garments in black and white, it is about honoring the resilience of the people who still keep them alive. And if you'd like to stay in Epirus a little longer, I made another film entirely in black and white, showing this tradition exactly as I photographed them. You'll find it here on the screen, just click and join me there next. Okay, cheers guys, bye, ta-ta!